Live, this is Beattie and Newman.
Well, welcome to Beattie and Newman. We're going to do something different tonight. We're going to talk about how to get young people engaged in politics and doing politics different, because a lot of Australians are sick of it.
Look, they are, and we hear about all the thoughts of the older generation, people like us, or
like me, not so much you.
Just older generation. Well, come on, I could probably get a seniors card next year, Peter. But I digress. Anyway, look, so we should talk about what the youth think about politics.
And different way to do politics. How do you engage people?
Well, we're going to do a couple of things tonight. The first thing is we're going to talk to a bloke by the name of Adam Jacoby from MiVote. I'm going to introduce him in a sec. And he's standing by to talk to us from
his launch. And he's just done a big launch too.
Big launch in Collingwood.
In Melbourne.
And then we're going to talk to the
National President
of Young Labor, and we're going to talk to Vice President of the Young Nationals.
Out of Queensland.
Out of Queensland, yeah. So, anyway, look.
That'll be interesting.
Without any further ado, let's now talk to Adam Jacoby, who has founded an organisation called MiVote. And look, I'm not going to try and explain it, but Adam joins us now from Collingwood in Melbourne this evening, where he's just launched formally MiVote. So thanks for joining us, Adam. What's it all about, mate?
Thanks, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. Look, MiVote is a global social, political, not-for-profit movement that was built ultimately to inform and represent and empower the will of the people. So we're here to bring genuine democracy back to the political system, try and move a bit of the politics outside of the democracy, and try and put a bit more democracy back into politics.
Adam, how did you...
And so we're using...
how did you come up with the idea? And just tell us a bit about how you've developed it.
Yeah, look, 6 years ago we started looking at the problem and particularly the way that people were being represented, and it's probably worth saying that although we're having a conversation today about young people in the community, MiVote is really built for everybody, and at this stage half of our membership are actually over 50 and living in rural areas. But we first started to look at the parts of democracy that had eroded over time. So specifically, what are the elements that had a purpose 200 years ago when the system was invented, and we started using it, but now we know actually either don't work, have been eroded, people are taking advantage of those elements, and then equally, what are the new technological applications that we can put into our democratic political systems to make them stronger, more efficient, more representative, and more secure for voters themselves?
So, Adam, just in a nutshell, if I wanted to get involved in MiVote, one, tell us how to do it, and secondly, what does it mean in practical terms? If you want to engage me, say, for example, I'm disillusioned, I'm sick of all political parties, what does it mean for me? How do I get involved?
Yeah, excellent. So, good question. So, effectively what you do is you come to the website, it costs you nothing to become a member of MiVote, and you're able to have a say on a policy-by-policy issue, on every issue, any way you want. So, specifically, the candidates that will be running for MiVote have a set of governing principles, a set of operating rules that ensure that they are genuinely democratic. So, some of the things, for example, is policy is not set by MiVote-powered independents unless the majority of a constituency have spoken, and our majority is not 51%, it's 60%, and that we're talking about destinational approaches. So I'll give you a really practical example of how it would work. So you would come on, you'd download the app, or you'd go onto the internet, because you don't need to download the app, you could do it through the web, and what would effectively happen is you would be given a choice. So let's say, for example, asylum seeker policy. So right now, the conversation that the existing political system has is a binary adversarial. Do you support the bill? Do you not support the bill? Ordinarily, if one side of politics writes the bill, the other side of politics doesn't want to support it. What we're talking about is a much larger macro conversation. So the kind of thing we would be asking constituents is, with asylum seekers, do you want your government to take a primarily humanitarian approach? Or do you want it to take a primarily national security approach? Or a primarily financially pragmatic approach? Or an international law approach, as an example? And then with each of those approaches, we explain, because you can't have real democracy without an informed constituency. So people have to understand what they're voting on to be able to cast a vote. So we would explain, for example, if you believe in a humanitarian approach, these are the sorts of policy settings you could support, these are the ones you couldn't support. Every vote that we've cast so far, we've had 5 votes so far, thousands and thousands of Australians are voting on each vote, and each one comes with international research reports. So we haven't had less than 150 research reports that people can delve into if they want to. Nobody's forced to do that, but you are forced to read the minimum amount to inform yourself. So if you don't read all 4 of the different destinations that we can take as macro policy, your voting light will never go on. Once we do vote, if we have a 60% majority on the constituency, that now forms the policy for MiVote independent candidates, and they are forced to adhere to that. So we're an entirely transparent organisation. Everything about us is transparent. But those candidates are very different to traditional...
Yeah.
Go on, yep.
No, I was going to say, Adam, it seems to me like you're going back very much to the old Greek model where everybody had a say. But so you will actually run candidates in particular seats at the next federal election?
Yeah, at this stage we have more than 25 candidates who are going through our training programs right now in this country. We expect that we'll have more than 100 who will run in both state and federal elections in the next 12 months in Australia, and we're opening chapters everywhere. So we'll have, but we know already that we have people running for the US Congress in June next year. We have people running in England. We have people running in Malaysia, people running in Scotland, people running in India, all on the same set of operating principles. So, for example, they can't take corporate or vested interest money ever. So it's written into our constitution. You have to take donations from individuals. Those names and those amounts are transparent on the website in real time. You can't serve more than 2 terms because it can't be about careerism. This has to be about a civic duty. Those individual candidates agree that they won't have a policy position unless a majority of people have spoken. They're not even allowed to talk about their own positions while a live vote is taking place. If you serve 2 terms, you have to serve as a mentor for the next generation, and there are about 16 other things that each of those candidates adhere to. Importantly, each of those candidates are bound to the direction of their constituency. So unlike what we're seeing with the same-sex marriage postal vote, where you have members of parliament whose constituencies have spoken and they are choosing to ignore those constituencies, which is about as undemocratic a proposition as you could possibly have. MiVote independents who sign on to our platform do so understanding that if they breach their obligation to their constituency, there's a fairly whopping financial fine for doing that.
Oh, now, well, can you go into that a bit in a bit more detail? And just to preface this, we see all the time, and I had an experience when I was Premier. I had people who'd been elected under the LNP banner who jumped ship. We saw a One Nation senator the other day who was on the One Nation ticket, and I was only there for 30 seconds and then jumped ship, Senator Anning. So how does this penalty work? How are you really going to keep them on the straight and narrow with MiVote? Yeah, so because we're not a political party, we're a movement. We're a technology platform that enables anyone anywhere in the world to run for any public office, and we just give them the support mechanisms that they require. You're not engaging in a traditional political relationship. The people aren't running for MiVote, and we're not setting policy agenda. The people set the policy agenda. But because we're giving you a multi-million-dollar piece of technology for free to use under a set of operational rules, you acknowledge that there will be a fine for particular breaches to your behaviour. And the most serious of those of the breaches is that you ignore the will of the constituency or you take corporate or vested interest money. And that will trigger a fine that's equal to 150% of your first full term in elected office, should you be elected.
Whoa! Oh, I tell you what.
This is getting more interesting.
This is getting more interesting all the time.
We're not mucking around, boys.
I tell you what, it sounds pretty good to me.
Sensational.
Yeah, keeps people honest. Adam, let me ask you this. So this would apply to all issues. What about matters of conscience? Say, for example, on a sensitive issue like abortion or even same-sex marriage, for that matter. You've already explained that one. But what about abortion? Would you be still bound by the vote of your constituency on conscious issues?
Well, look, Look, it's a good question, except the idea of a conscience vote relates to the idea of a political party binary adversarial system. So because every voter can vote on every issue for free and we provide information, our candidates are bound by the will of their constituency. So everybody is able to have their view. But in a democracy, the majority must win. If we're at a point where we start to say, the majority of people want to go in this particular direction, but I'm not going to go in that direction, I have a different view, then we've got to stop calling ourselves a democracy. And equally, we have to start really questioning the role of politicians in our community. Because if people are going to stand up and say, I'm going to represent a particular electorate, and that electorate votes and says what they want, and they then get ignored, frankly, I'm not sure that those people can put their hands up again and say that they want to run. On what basis can that electorate trust those candidates?
Adam, there'll be some people watching you this evening who'll say, oh, this is just populism, because essentially it's just putting out to like a mini opinion poll every time. And I actually don't agree with that the premise of the question I'm putting to you, but can you, for the benefit, because I've had a look at what you're doing in more detail, can you sort of go into a bit more detail about why it's not a simplistic opinion poll? Because you're basically because you're about educating as well, aren't you?
Oh, most definitely. So I think the reason MiVote has caught on where other movements haven't quite caught the attention of the world, and again, you know, we've got thousands of people voting on this platform. The underlying premise is that democracy is about enacting the will of the people, and you can't enact the people's will if you don't ask them what they want. I mean, it's pretty basic logic. So from that point, we ask, we don't tell. The second point is that you can't ask people to vote on something if they're uninformed on the issue. So I agree with you that the idea of having direct democracy of an uninformed constituency where people can vote on whatever they want, they don't have to understand the issue, it's at a 51% perspective and you're voting on legislation, is about as dangerous an idea as you could possibly find. That is true populism, and really that's frightening. What we're talking about is ensuring that everybody has to at least understand the basics of the issue. That's the first step. The second thing is we're talking about position or destinational votes as opposed to legislative, and we have a minimum 60% requirement to form policy. When I started this 6 years ago, I spoke to the most famous political professors all over the world, and without fail, everybody said to me the exact same thing. It is impossible to get a 60% majority in a two-party binary adversarial system. And we've had 5 votes, and we've never had less than 60% since we started. So, you know, we're doing what they said was impossible, because when you take left and right and blue and red, and you take the heat out of the argument and you let people just look at the facts as they are, and you provide them openly and transparently with that information so that they don't have to trust somebody else is telling it to them. It's right there. They can read it for themselves. And you're saying, as a gut check, where do you want this country to go, as opposed to, do you understand a 2,000-page piece of legislation? People have a sense of where they want the country to go. And if you can make sure that they're informed and they're armed with the best information available, and our process does that, it's too long to go through today, but certainly you can see it on the website, mivote.org.au, you know, that's a really healthy place for a democracy to be, because people are all equal, everybody has an equal say. They know what they're voting about, and they understand that what they vote on, should it find a 60% majority, the candidates that they're voting for have to actually enact that outcome. And so if you think about it from a business context, the way that we talk about it is the people are the board of the organisation. So we determine, we're the board, we set the agenda of where this group is going to go. The politicians become the senior executives whose job it is to enact and deliver that strategy. And then the public service are the managers and the employees who have to manage that day to day. So it's a fundamental rethink on how democracy works.
Adam, just 2 quick questions, because these are fundamental to the success of it. What happens if, for example, and this is the first one, you don't get 60%, then what is the position of the Member of Parliament? And secondly, how do you actually get your independents elected? Because you're going to be up against, you're saying no corporate money, which is refreshing, but frankly, they're going to need resources to actually get elected. So you're going to use social media. How will you overcome the major political parties?
Yes,
There are 2 questions.
We are. Yeah, so I'll answer the first question first. The question about what happens if we don't get 60%. So actually, it's not just 60%. We have even more stringent rules on that. So if we put on a vote tomorrow and less than 25% of our membership doesn't vote, we have another problem. That can't form a policy. So we can't put something out, have 10% of our members vote on it and say that that represents the will of the people, because that's equally undemocratic. So whether we don't have 60% or we don't have a minimum requirement, we do a 2 to run off. So we always put in 4 choices to the constituency. If we run it and we don't have 60%, then what we're basically going to do is run the vote again, but take out the 2 least popular and vote on the 2 most popular to get a position. If we still don't have 60% or we still don't have the minimum 25% of our membership, then we go to a citizen jury of 50 randomly selected members of our group. So it's a very well thought out. It took 6 years to build this model. We've had political scientists, former politicians, former prime ministers, former presidents try to break it. We openly say, come and help us make it better. We do not claim that MiVote is perfect. What we do claim is that it's better than anything else out there, which is why we have so many thousands of people joining us and so many new countries trying to start new chapters. To your point about what happens with raising money. So since we started, we officially became a not-for-profit organisation in Australia just under 2 years ago. In that time, we've had about $1.5 to $2 million donated by everyday people on the street. You can see their names and numbers. It's on the website, very transparent. And we're now launching tonight. I mean, it's why there are all these people here. We're now launching a product called Democratise Me. It's the first time in our existence we're doing a major crowdfunding campaign. We built a Facebook game that enables people to play along and let their friends control them in the same way that MiVote works. So people can choose what you're going to have for breakfast and what you're going to wear that day and what, do a funny little dance, and you put on videos. It's a fun way of explaining to people how democracy actually works, and to do it in the same way that the Ice Bucket Challenge and other activities worked. It's fundraising for us, and that enables us to move into these new markets. And each of the individual candidates themselves can do their own crowdfunding on our technology platform within their own communities. So rather than a party deciding whether or not you're worthy of representing their brand in that community, we say the community should decide who represents them. And if somebody stands up as an independent under our set of rules, we'll give them the tools to help them raise the money so that they can have a real competition. And the people that we'll announce in January who will be running, I think it's going to give the traditional parties a bit of a shock.
Well, Adam, it certainly will give the traditional parties
I think it will as well.
What you've said. Thank you so much for your time. I'm afraid we are out of time, but thank you so much for coming on this evening. If you want to stay tuned with some of your friends this evening at the launch, you can hear what the reaction of the Federal President of Young Labor and the Vice President of the Young Nats. So thank you, Adam. Really
and good luck.
Yeah, and good luck.
Thanks so much for the time. Thank you.
Well, stay tuned. As you heard, we'll be back in a moment with 2 leaders or young political leaders, and we'll be talking philosophically this evening, but we'll also get them to comment on MiVote. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.